Welcome back to Drum Electric. So today we're going to be looking at recording drums with just two overheads, a kick and a snare. So a really simple recording setup to get you started if you've just sort of delved into that world of brand new mics and new interface and you're not quite sure where to start. But in order to do that, I'm going to need to move this guy out the way. So I'm going to move that out the way, get the mic set up, and let's do this. Truly magical. Look at that! This is the magic of videos, in the sense that my whole kit can just be set up like that, taken down and set up, and I magically change my clothes and potentially my hat. I can't remember. This is what I want gigs to be like. It's 2020. Remember gigs? So the kit is done. I've changed them round. I did originally have, I believe the red one was a PDP Concept Maple. It's a really, really old kit. It's about 7 years old now. Whereas this one is a personal favorite of mine. This is the Yamaha Absolute Hybrid Maple with the 20-inch kick. Normally I have two up, one down, but today I'm sat in the way. I've got a mismatching recording custom floor tom because I don't have the 16-inch floor tom yet, but it's allowed. If you want to see that a little bit closer up, by all means head over to the Drum Electric Instagram where you can see it. So this video is a fun one. If you've ever noticed the kit behind me in my videos, they've always got two overheads, a snare and a kick drum. Not that you can see the kick drum, but there's a kick drum mic on it. Now, the extra nosy ones among you will notice that their toms are only sometimes mic'd up. Today they're mic'd up, but we're going to ignore them today because today is all about your introduction to recording drums. You've got some mics, you've got the interface, you have a rough idea of what to do, but you're not 100% on it. Today is the day. We're looking at recording a drum kit with only two overheads, a snare and a kick drum mic. It will get you a really nice sound, and it's something that I use all the time. If you checked out my videos on how to live stream drums, most of that was just two overheads, snare and kick, and even now that's mostly what I use. I'm just treating myself because I've got tom mics on now, so I can. But like I said, we'll ignore those for now. We're just going to talk about overhead, snare, kick to get a really nice sound. In this video, I'm not going to go deep into like EQ, compression, post-mixing, stuff like that. This is all about just the basics that will get you started into the world of recording. So start here, see if you like it. If it interests you, then have a little go further. See what happens when you change your mic placement, what happens when you look at different EQ things and stuff like that. But for this video, it's just the basics. How do we get started? How do we get a sound from the microphones into our DAW, our digital audio workstation like Logic, GarageBand, and make it sound good? So for the overheads, oh, I pointed in the wrong direction. So for the overheads, these ones are actually really, really old. I believe these are the Red 5 pencil condensers. I've had them for coming up to nearly 10 years now, which is kind of just goes to show A, the sheer robustness of them and the fact that they've lasted this long, and B, that you don't actually need anything fancy to do the job. Now, I would love to upgrade these at some point because they don't sound the best, but for what we're looking for today, they do a great job. Now, to set these up, a general rule of thumb is to set them up equal distance from each other. So I've got two, so I'm running a stereo rig. That means this is my overhead left, and then just behind my head, you can see the right, which is just above the hi-hats. This one, as you can see, is just above my ride cymbal, but this will obviously change depending on your setup and stuff like that. So a great rule of thumb is to grab an XLR, a jack cable, something long, and put it against the bass drum and then measure it from here and see if it's equal distance to the other side. You can also do this from the snare drum. Some people do it bass drum to snare drum and do it that way. It depends on what you're looking for. For me, I like the bass drum because it gives a really nice equal stereo sound. So sometimes the snare drum can be a bit loud, sometimes the bass drum can be a bit loud. This gives a nice equal sound throughout the whole kit. That also is because the bass drum is right in the middle of my kit. For those of us that have bigger kits, the snare drum might be in the middle rather than the bass drum. So measure it from roughly around where the center of the kit is, and that's a really good starting place to be. A really quick tip with the overheads is that if they're sounding distant in the mix, so you're getting a lot of room, and when you put other instruments on the kit, it's starting to sound like you're losing the overheads or the kit is the other side of a room, lower them down. So go a little lower, as long as you've still got room to move the drumstick around, and that creates a lot closer sound. Equally, if you want more room sound, if you want more natural reverb within your room, raise them up quite a lot. This is the same if you've got overheads on a gig and you've got in-ears and you're not quite getting enough kit. Lower them down, you'll get a pretty good sound. But like I said, experiment, see what works best in your environment, because it will be completely different to the one that I have in here. Yeah, I don't know why I do this to myself, just kneeling on my drum mat that I definitely should have hoovered about 6 months ago. So for the snare mic, I'm not using anything fancy. This is probably something you've seen around everywhere. It's the Shure SM57. I need to turn my snare wires off. The Shure SM57, which is way too cheap for how good it is. It's an incredible microphone, and you can use it for so much more than just a snare mic. I will also point out that I'm not using an underhead mic, so we're just miking up the top head for this setup, keeping it simple. So a general rule of thumb when setting up the mic, as you can see, it's pointed into the drum. How far away from the drum, things like that, will again depend on the size of the drum, what you're using, but a general rule of thumb, similar to the overheads, is 2 finger widths up from the snare head, alright? So 2 finger widths up from the snare head. I tend to point it between that lovely sweet spot between the center of the drum and the rim. A general rule of thumb for this in terms of tone coming from the mic, the further in you point it to the center of the drum, the more attack you'll get. The further out will be the more body and more ring. So I have this really nice sweet spot on this Yamaha Recording Custom Aluminium snare. Real nice snare, 14 by 5.5, standard stuff. I get a really nice sweet spot just a little bit away from the rim. But again, start here and experiment, see what sounds best. I'm not going to admit how much fun I'm having walking around and placing the camera on obscure items. If you want to see the behind the scenes of this, go over to Instagram and you can see how I've got this angle really high because my tripod is not high enough. But for the bass drum, I'm here because I can't actually get behind my kit because, as you can see, I'm facing a wall, which isn't the best place to have a drum kit, but in the current circumstance, that's just where it has to be right now. But for the bass drum, I'm using an Audix D6 microphone, which is my favorite bass drum microphone. I've used a couple and this one sounds the best, both live and in the studio. It gets the nicest sound from the drums that I use, and I love it a little too much. But if you can get your hands on an Audix D6, I highly recommend it. It's great for anything low end. So if you've got a 16 or 18 inch floor tom, lob a D6 on it and it will sound amazing. So that's what I'm using for my bass drum. Now, as you can see from this footage, it's not within that porthole, and that's right now because I've got the 20 inch kick up, so it's a little bit more punchy. It's not got as much low end, and because I actually have an interior bass drum mic set up. But we don't need to worry about that right now. So that D6 on the outside, as you can see, it's a couple of centimeters away from that front skin. It's as close as I can get without that front skin hitting that mic. And this is because that gives the most low end. For you guys, if you've got a porthole, then the further in you go and the more you point that microphone to where that bass drum beater is hitting, the more attack you'll get. So when I've just got the one mic on the bass drum, I tend to have just the top of the mic in the porthole facing the beater and then the rest outside of the porthole, and it gives me a really nice general overall sound. It's got that punch and it's also keeping that low end. If you want that oomph, a lot of low end, copy what I've done and put that bass drum mic just off center of that bass drum and millimeters away from that skin, just far enough that it doesn't hit it, but as close as you can physically get, and you'll get a really nice round low end sound, and it sounds great. But for starters, like I said, put the bass drum mic about halfway into that porthole, aim it close to where the beater hits the bass drum, and then that will give you a really nice punchy bass drum sound. So in terms of interface, we've got the mic set up now, which is all really nice. We've got them all cabled up and going nowhere. So in terms of interface, I'm using the Focusrite 18i20. This is, I believe, the 2nd gen, but I've had it for a couple of years and it's never failed me so far. This is where it fails me for the end of the day, but I've never had any problems with it, and it sounds incredible. It's a nice mid-range interface, and it's for the stuff that you can get out of it, it's a really good price. This isn't sponsored by Focusrite, but Focusrite, if you're listening, you've got amazing gear. So with this interface, and why I love it is because you can literally plug and play with it. Once you've got it turned on and ready, then you can just plug in your mics from inputs 1 to 4 in this case, because we're only using 4 mics, and you're good to go. Now, obviously, I have the one that has 8 inputs, and you may not need 8 inputs. They have a full range. Check them out and see what works best for your setup. Make sure you have that phantom power turned on for the 2 overheads if you need it. In my case, I do. That's just the little 48-volt button. It will turn red once it's turned on, and you'll see some signal come in for those overheads. For gain adjustment, I tend to play it and adjust it until that little LED goes just into the orange. Not too much, because I like to have a little bit of headroom, so if I play louder, then I've got that headroom. And it also means when coming into the DAW, the digital audio workstation, like Logic in my case, it means that I've got headroom on there as well to adjust mixing outside of it. Again, we don't need to worry too much about that, but as a general rule of thumb, as long as it's not hitting the red, then you're fine. The red means it's clipping, it's distorting, and that is bad. Red is a no-no. No-no for the red. But that's it for the Focusrite. It's as easy as that. Just adjust it accordingly, make sure the gain isn't hitting the red, and you're good to go. So earlier I mentioned a DAW, a digital audio workstation. All this means is the software that your mics go into. So this could be Logic, GarageBand, Audacity, Pro Tools, Cubase, all of that stuff. It doesn't matter which one you use, as long as you're using the one you're most comfortable with, because everything I'm just about to show you will apply to all of them across the board. So I'm going to be using Logic for this, just because I'm on a Mac and that's what I'm used to. If you're using GarageBand, this is essentially the next step up. GarageBand is the slightly more simplified version of Logic. So if you're thinking about it and you want to upgrade from GarageBand, Logic is going to be the easiest step up for you. For anyone else using Audacity, Pro Tools, stuff like that, like I said, it's all the same thing. The preferences and stuff like that, you all need to follow the same steps. So just make sure you adjust accordingly to your DAW. So the first thing we want to do is open an empty project. So here in Logic, you just get this first menu up, new project, empty projects, double click it and it will open. There we go. So the first thing we want to do is actually make sure that our device is the Scarlett 8920 USB or whatever interface you're using. So in order to do that, click that little arrow. You'll get this preferences come up, and then you want to make sure the output device and input device is the same thing. So like I said, in my case, it's the Scarlett 8920 USB. They're both set there. Make sure you hit this apply button down at the bottom, and then you're good to go. Once you've done that, then it's a case of creating our 4 audio tracks, because we've got 2 overheads, kick and snare. 4 tracks, nice and easy. So you can do this in 2 ways. Here's a little trick. You may not have known this. You might have known this. So audio input, it's input 1, audio input 1. Number of tracks, I'm going to go 4 because that's how many I want. Hit create, and that will now create 4 audio tracks, just like that. You can do this with as many tracks as you like. You can also change the input to ascending, but we won't worry about that. So what it's done is created 4 audio tracks with audio 1. If you look on the left here where it says input, that's input 1, audio 2, input 2, and so on, audio 3, input 3, audio 4, input 4. So I'm just going to rename these to kick, snare, overhead left, overhead right. There we go, and we've got our 4 tracks. With the overheads, I tend to pan them left and right, obviously accordingly. The left one is above my hi-hat and the right one is above my ride cymbal. Some people like it the other way around. This is just personal preference, so do whatever you want with this one. For me, I don't like to pan it the whole way. I like to about 45 to 50. I'm going to go 48 just because I like the sound of it, but again, experiment after the fact and see what you like. So we've got those set up. Now it's just a case of recording drums and seeing what it sounds like. So I'm going to record on them by holding down the click and dragging down. I've also got in-ears in, so I'm going to hit that I to monitor it and listen to it at the same time. So let's get recording. Let's see what happens. So there we go, we've got our 4 tracks, we've got kick, snare, overhead left and overhead right, and as you can see, they're recorded fine, no problems at all. I'm just going to zoom in by pinching on my trackpad, not that far, that's a little bit too far, and there we go, and then use this button up here just so I can see it a bit better. Now, those recorded all quite well. As you can see, the kick was what we call a little bit hot. So I need to turn the gain down on the kick a little bit because, as you can see, the waveform here is nearly touching the bottom and the top. When it's that high, it means you don't have that headroom I was talking about earlier, and it just means it's closer to clipping and distorting and just not sounding very nice. So for me, I'm just going to turn the kick gain down so I don't have that. But the rest, as you can see with the snare especially, I can probably turn that up a little bit. There's loads of room between, and then the overheads are pretty much perfect. So let's have a quick listen back. Let's see what it sounds like. Perfect. So listening back, it doesn't sound too shabby at all. It sounds pretty good, especially for kick, snare and 2 overheads. You're getting a really nice clear sound of the drums, and that's what we want. So just a little quick tip about mixing. I'm not going to go full in, it's just so you guys can get a good sound from it. The way I do it is I'll loop it. So I just grab the loop up here, drag all the way across, and that creates so just loop round and round and round. What I do is I just select all of the tracks, turn them all the way down, and then I mix according to the overheads. So I'll bring up each overhead so it creates an equal sound. They may be at different volumes, but if it creates an equal sound between them, then we're good. And then I'll bring in the kick slowly and the snare slowly, just so they add a little bit more punch. Take a look, this is what I mean. Cool, so as you can hear, the snare is really quiet, so all I'm just going to do is I'm just going to double click the track, functions, normalize region gain, and just hit apply. As you can see, that just brings everything all the way up and normalizes it. Basically, in short, it makes it louder, because as you can see, I've cranked the snare quite high and it's still not that much in the mix. So I'll just play it back and see what happens. And there we have it. So that's a really quick video into recording with 2 overheads, a kick and snare, and a little bit of mixing just so you have a general idea. If this is something that you're really interested in and love doing, please start exploring with mics on the toms and things like that, and actually mixing and using EQs, compressions, gates, because it gets very nerdy and very fun, and I do love doing this sort of side of things. As I said before, this is a setup that I've done so many recording projects on, and so many both clients and friends have been really happy with the sound of this kit just from these 4 mics. So this is a fantastic place to start if you're looking at recording drums for even the first time and you've got these mics and you're not sure what to do with them. Start here and then expand further when your knowledge is ready. By all means, don't rush any of this. It takes a long time, but the best part is you can mess around with it to your heart's delight. So start here, see how you feel, start messing with mic placements, different things, different volumes, and see how it goes. And that is that. That's your quick introduction to miking up a drum kit, recording it, and making it sound good on a DAW of your choice. If you have any comments or questions, as always, please lob them in the comment section down below. I'd love to help out wherever I can, and it's great talking to you guys. As always, like the video, subscribe for all of our shiny new videos, and I will see you in the next one.